Welcome to Line Change, a podcast about hockey, social issues, and change makers in the game we love. I'm your host, Ian Kennedy. Welcome to Line Change. I'm your host, Ian Kennedy, and today we are talking to none other than Brock McGillis. Brock is an LGBTQ plus advocate. He is the first ever openly gay professional hockey player, and he recently was one of the founders of the Alphabet Sports Collective, an organization looking to advocate, support, build up, and celebrate the LGBTQ plus community in hockey. With so much going on in relation to hockey and the LGBTQ plus community, we're going to jump right into this conversation where Brock's going to provide us with some insight as well as his thoughts on where the game of hockey needs to go next. We'll also talk about a few fun things like Brock's opinion, which is very valid, that hockey players need to improve their skincare regimens. From fun to serious, I'm your host Ian Kennedy, and welcome to another edition of Line Change. Welcome to Brock. We're here to talk about a whole variety of things from LGBTQ plus inclusion in hockey to the new Alphabet Sports Collective, which I'm really excited to talk to you about. But first, I think we would be remiss without talking about some of the things that are going on in the hockey world right now. Maybe you can just give me your kind of instant feedback on what the state of the NHL, the hockey world, and just, what LGBTQ plus people are feeling at the moment with everything that's been happening.
What's happening?
Oh, Brock.
Wait, this is your podcast? You told me you just wanted to talk. I told you, I said specifically on Twitter I would not do your podcast.
Yeah, well, I've tricked you. We're here. It's happening.
I'm one of the angry trolls
who
come for you daily.
Yeah, that's right. You must be. I don't know which one of your fake accounts it is, but I'm going to figure it out.
They're all my burners.
Figures. I would expect actually, nothing less.
Can I be honest with you, though? And I hope you keep this in. I think you should be grateful for all of them because they're going to hate listen.
That's true.
And that's clicks and views, Ian. and that matters more than anything else. It doesn't matter why they're listening as long as they're listening.
That's, I've stuck by that standpoint for a long time. I have never really gone out there and started blocking people until recently because things kind of amplified a bit. But I always thought, you know what? If they hate it and they're reading it or seeing it, that's still a step forward. It's still in their realm. They're still being exposed to the content and to the discussions. And I don't know if it makes people more angry and more divided, but at least they're there.
So Ian, why do you hate hockey?
I love hockey. You know that just like you do. And, you're actually the person that sparked this entire podcast idea.
Oh, great. Yeah. They're going to come for me now. Stop it.
So here's the story. Sitting at dinner one night with Brock McGillis, he looked at me and said, you know what? You're much nicer than I thought you were going to be based on your Twitter persona. And I said, well, that's a great compliment. And the discussion came up that I should do something like this where people actually get to see that I'm not the most hated person in hockey. And that we'll reserve that title for someone else.
Well, you are the most hated person in hockey. You're just actually a nice guy.
Ah, thank you.
I think that should be your Twitter bio.
It should be. Just a nice guy. I think that would go over a lot.
Most hated person, but actually a nice guy.
Okay. Yes, that's a good addition. I think if we add that in, people will be really intrigued rather than what it says right now, which I'm not even sure. Other than the fact that people tell me all the time that my pronouns he, him are definitely there. I do get reminded of that part, but whatever else is in there, I'm not sure. So I will add that most hated person in hockey, but really a nice guy. Quotation. Brock McGillis.
What if you went he, him is
even better?
The most hated person in hockey, but actually a nice guy.
Even better. seems like a whole. I really don't think they're going to buy it. They're just going to call me a narcissist who's propping himself up even more if I call myself a nice guy. But well, that's why we need the quote from you.
Well, Gordon Miller kind of called me a narcissist the other night, and I'm here for it. So
I hope there's some good context behind that, not bad context.
I just said I'm making hockey handsome across North America, and he called me modest,
Huh.
which I think was sarcasm. And yeah,
Well, you know what? I do fully agree with your critique that more hockey players should be concerned about their skincare regimen and working a little bit on their beautification so that they don't look like you can only take so many punches to the face and cuts and scars without at some point thinking about your skin.
Ian, if we get into this topic, I'm going to start swearing, and I don't know if you want curse language on your
I don't know. It hasn't happened yet. I think
podcast.
this is PG
Well,
so
for
far.
sakes, just like get a toner, get a moisturizer, stop using body wash to wash your face. Like an eye cream would not kill anyone. You make a lot of money. Botox is accessible to all of you. Please, please, it'll grow the game.
That's
Everyone likes looking at beauty.
you heard it here first. I think that's why with all the masculinity, we have to have our faces exposed in the game of hockey. You can't wear a full cage or a full visor. So if it's going to be open and exposed for the world to see, let's make it beautiful.
Yeah, and it can be masculine and beautiful.
That's right. That's of course the truth. So, anyways,
Just
thank you
solve the world's
thank you
problems.
for picking on me for the first couple minutes of this.
Oh, I'm not done.
That's perfectly
But
fine.
you can ask a question.
All right, let's jump back to this whole discussion. What's happening in the world of pride? What do you think? Maybe you can just, from your perspective, because I know one of your biggest things is humanizing issues. So I have a real person sitting in front of me here in you that's a part of the community that is a hockey person. Maybe you can just explain what you think the purpose of pride is, because I agree with a lot of probably what you would say in this standpoint, that we want to make sure we're supporting the community itself. We want to make sure we're building up LGBTQ plus people. We want to make sure that they are safe and that these activities are not just performative and not just for the allies. But from your standpoint, what's going on right now?
Well, let's start with Pride Nights, and candidly, I don't care for them. Like, and that this is my personal opinion. Brock McGillis talking, not Alphabet Sports Collective or anyone else. Now I have to preface this. Slapping rainbows in arenas one night a year does not inclusion make. Slapping rainbows in an arena has not eradicated homophobia. It hasn't eradicated homophobic language and behaviors in the stands or in the locker rooms. There's been studies done now that show that it has very little to no impact on the sports culture. So to me, Pride was a protest. Pride was a fight for rights. Pride started right after the year after the Stonewall riots. And it was as homosexuality was being decriminalized in the United States. And it was for inclusion. And then through the 80s, it became a fight for our lives as queer people with the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And then into the 2000s for gay marriage. And even today, we're seeing so many states revert backwards, like Florida with Don't Say Gay and different things. And also, the lack of trans inclusion in society and a fight for their rights. So I don't love that it gets conflated into this rainbow celebration night in sports cultures when we don't even have what I would consider rights within men's team sports.
Mm-hmm.
Give me safe and inclusive spaces. Give me stands where queer people can go with their partners and hold hands just like a straight couple can, and not worry or fear assault or harassment or anything else that is going on, by the way. Like, this is a common thing. A team had a pride night, I'm not going to say which team, a week or so ago, and 3 people were kicked out of the stadium for using homophobic slurs at the game. And that is at their pride night. What's happening at their, regular nights? And they're an inclusive organization. There's far less inclusive spaces than theirs. So they at least kicked them out. I know of other places that aren't even doing that. What these organizations do in the community matters more to me than rainbows and rainbow jerseys, frankly. When they partner with groups, like I was recently in Chicago and found out that they work with groups that help when kids get off the bus in, Chicago's the big hub of the Midwest, and when kids get off the bus, they go to this center, and they help them get like life-saving support, like jobs and different things, shelter, etc. And the Chicago team has partnered with them. Like, I want to see more of that stuff in the community from a community base. And then when you're doing that stuff, then, I'm okay, then we can start talking about rainbows. But even then, from there, that is still just corporate culture. That's corporate hockey culture. And I still don't think we have any rights or inclusion in the sport locker room or on ice cultures. These players coming out and saying things, wonderful, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But the language, behaviors, attitudes in locker rooms and on ice are the reason why, we have 2 players playing in Europe that are LGBTQ plus on the men's side, and 1 playing in North America. Like, newer studies show that over 20% of the population is LGBTQ plus, and we have 3 active players. There's only been 2 professional, major, junior, and professional players to come out in the sport in North America. Like, really? When on average there's probably about 4 in a locker room.
Yeah, and I don't think people understand that. I mean, I talk a lot about this issue online, and I think a lot of people believe that, and this is probably where some of the hate come from, that I'm just doing it for clicks or something. But
aren't you?
Yeah, of course, yeah. But you know me as a person, and I live this every day as well. And I don't think a lot of people understand the percentage of openly out queer kids that there are out there that really need love and support because of all of these laws and rules and the traditional oppression and prosecution or persecution of these people. And so I run a group with a bunch of LGBTQ plus teenagers. I've sat on my community's pride board. I really love being a part of all of the groups I'm with and the people. And part of that was I was obviously in those locker rooms. I learned homophobic language as soon as it was possible. I learned transphobic language right alongside of it. And, it was part of my everyday vernacular. It wasn't something I didn't use. I would be a liar if I said that. And, but it was also, something that people would call me if I didn't come across as tough enough or whatever. And that, those stereotypes, the toxic masculinity, the internalized homophobia, that all of these things that come out in the game. You're right. I wish more teams were doing education, funding programming, funding supports in communities. I think the issue with Pride is that, at least in the terms of the NHL right now, is that I think people want it just to be a symbol that everyone is welcome and included, but we're not there even to that point yet. So the rights outside of the rink are really, as you said, that they're moving backwards right now. There's an actual attack on human rights, in particular right now, the trans community. Of course, I think everyone knows that some of the laws that are going on related to sports as well, and it's really harmful and sad. And for me, that's living beside so many kids in this community, it hurts to see it, and it hurts to see their reaction to it. And that's that humanizing portion, because I didn't know a single person that was out in my high school growing up. I was in a super rural, super conservative, super right wing kind of, and very Christian community. But I don't think that necessarily means anything, and that's part of the debate that's been going on in the NHL. But definitely taught to hate, right, and definitely taught to exclude, and especially in the hockey locker room, throwing around the F word was so common and prevalent, and hearing it on the ice. But as soon as I met the people in the community, it was like my whole life changed and my whole worldview changed from "I believe you're this" to "I had no idea what I was talking about, and now I want to be on the other side of things." And I don't know how we get there in hockey right now with how,
I do.
yeah, and that's where we're going. So tell me.
We have to humanize issues. Those kids that you worked with, and I've met some of them. I've, what I mean, engaged with them, and I've been there and seen them, and they humanized for you. They didn't have to teach you. It wasn't a textbook. It wasn't a this is what a gay person goes through, or this is the statistics on XYZ. That is boring, and people tune it out, quite candidly, in my opinion. It is something that after it's humanized for us, we may engage more with and want to know more, and then we start to learn or willing to be taught. But if you would have started with that, or if we start with that with these people, it's never going to work. It's humanization. Mm-hmm. We start by humanizing issues, and people will say, yeah, but they should know. Well, based off your lived experience, they should know.
Right. That's the whole argument that we're hearing online, with people saying, well, if it doesn't impact you, don't worry about it. But it does impact everybody. We're all connected.
It impacts 20% of the population, right, is LGBTQ plus. That means that they have gay teammates, they have queer relatives, they have so much that they don't even know about. But it's more the fact that people are like, we shouldn't have to humanize. They should know how we. And I'm like, well, from your experience and your lived experience, sure, except their lived experience is different than yours. So let's rewind, let's take a step back, and let's start at step one, mm-hmm, which is, here is the lived experience of somebody in your space, because it's so insular that it has to be people that have lived that life that they live. And then from there, it's, here's the impact. And after we get through the impact, they start to critically think, and they go, I don't want to be a bad person. Because I genuinely believe 99% of them are really good people.
Yeah.
Or think they are, or want to be. I think, right, that's just humans in general. So once we humanize, you'll get some that are like, okay, I just won't do that. You'll get some that will want to be, how can I help? You'll get some that will be like, I need to learn a little more, and I have some questions. And from my experience, that is the next step. And that's when education comes in. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you have deeper conversations with people. I wish that I was a tool used by the PA in the league for the James Reimer, Mark Stahl, and Eric Stahl, or which one of the 1,000 stalls?
Both. Two of the many. Two of
the three or four that play. And just been like, guys, like I grew up. We grew up around the same time. We grew up in the same areas, and this is how this space impacted me. And I deeply believe that if they're good Christians, they would be like, oh, Well, I don't want you to feel that way. And everything I hear about James Reimer is he's a really nice guy. So, but lack of exposure, because we're in such an insular world where everyone's hiding who they are if they are other, and then lack then of education and impact leads to this. The Russian players, that's a different story. And whether the threat is imminent or not, there's still been some form of threat. And I get it.
Well, they are really complex conversations. It's not just this is the whole idea of even this conversation, right? There's no black and white. Saying something is binary is just really it does divide people, and it makes these conversations harder to have. And you're right. I grew up in a very insular community. I grew up in the church, and that's a portion. Again, I don't really talk a lot about myself online because it makes me uncomfortable. But I mean, I spent 30 years heavily involved in the Christian church, and I still have faith in something. I still have faith in a higher power or whatever it might be. But I also have unlearned some of the harmful portions of that, where I was taught to just agree with everything that everybody told me and never see people for people. And that's a really dangerous part. And it's not a religious thing. It's just an insular thing. Like you said, it's just whenever you're surrounded by only like-minded, homogenous groups of people. And it really, one of the most beautiful things that I've seen recently in the game of hockey was attending the Alphabet Sports Collective launch party in Toronto. And I took this little video, and I think you reposted it a little while ago, but I just kind of scanned the crowd as a drag performance was going on. And it was, Journey, Don't Stop Believing, a classic hockey song that's on there. And the crowd, the people that are there, we've got NHL players, media members, athletes from across the board, just all kinds of people that you would think in the hockey world would not be as accepting and placing value in the community that they were. But they were, it was just such a joyful moment where people put their hands up in the air and everyone sang together and people were dancing, and it just felt good. And it felt like, for one moment, when I talk so much about all this negativity in the world, I was seeing something really good, and I was seeing a beginning of something that I was hopeful would change things, because bringing all those people into one space, this really diverse group of people of different backgrounds, different genders, different sexualities, different jobs, different ages. That there were 80-year-olds down to. Of course, it was at a bar, so people of age, but it was a huge spectrum of people there, and everybody there for the same purpose, and really just a magical event. And I know that you're really focusing in on the community itself with Alphabet Sports Collective, and maybe you can just tell me a little bit about that, because I do think that organizations like yours are going to play a bigger role in helping those people, helping the James Reimers of the world, or the Stalls, to, as you said, humanize it, so that it's not just a concept they learned in a book, but it's really something that they can put a face to and a name to, because it's a lot more difficult to be hateful when you're sitting down for coffee with Brock McGillis.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to help. Hope it helps them, but I don't care if it does, because I'm worried about my people. And I think the whole point of Alphabet is there's a lot of queer people in hockey. There are so many queer people in hockey, from players to people who work at the professional levels of the sport, to media folks, to fans. Like, there's, in every aspect of the game, we are represented, whether people know it or not. Beyond that, it has the possibility to grow. And I think back to 2 years ago during the NHL's first tweet for Pride Month was, we're going to celebrate allies. And it was kind of like straight people patting straight people on the back for Pride. And people were really upset over it. So I said, well, whatever. If you want to be interviewed, I'll interview and celebrate you. And Pride's June's my craziest month typically. But I took some time. I made an email address, got some people volunteer to edit, people volunteer to schedule, and threw an email address up on Twitter and said, if you want to be interviewed, I'll interview you. I thought, maybe 10, 15 people would reach out that night. We had over 400 people reach out that evening. We had to cap it at 120 just for time constraints and whatnot in my schedule. But in a week, I did 120 interviews. And then they got edited, and we just posted organically on my socials. Each person was like a thread. There were 4.6 million impressions on those 120 interviews and over 1 million engagements. Like, those are big numbers for like super organic, non-promoted, non-anything, posts. Like, it was wild. Then people start to meet each other, and I start to notice they start to chat with each other more on Twitter. And I start to recognize that, they became friends. They were creating bonds. And then after a while, a person from San Jose met up with someone else from Germany and somebody from Ireland. And the three of them met and went to an NHL game in the Czech Republic together. And they found their people. They found their community finally within this hockey space. Ultimately, for me, we can work. I think a lot of people have empathy, and my work is, to help those folks evolve. But we need to build up and unite this community. And then when Alphabet does that, and we have our membership program and we get people involved and become members, then from there, we need to get people to feel good, because there's a lot of oppression and struggles that come with being queer. Peer support, different things like that. And hopefully someday we have enough funding, pipe dream, but to fund therapy and different things for folks who need support. And then give them tools. Give them tools to be a part of the hockey world if they want to. They want to just be members, cool. But if they want tools, they want to get into coaching, if they want to sit on boards, if they want to manage teams, if they want to get involved in any capacity, let's give them tools to do so. Mentorship programs and different things, so that they can then have the tools to go out there and we can mobilize them. One of the biggest things I've noticed is that we lack seats at almost all tables. We might have allies and different things, or if there's a queer person, there's one, and they're working within the constructs that currently exist, and they don't have a support system behind them to deal with any, homophobia or transphobia they may experience, or even just microaggressions, and there's nobody to go to. And I know because most of the people come to me. And then once we're out there, and once we've mobilized people and we have seats at tables, we'll see that humanization will help. We'll be seen as equals, as peers, as just like everyone else. And then at that point, I know from personal experience, the language and behavior start to shift. And in the cases where it doesn't, and people are treated poorly, they have this entity behind them. And then from there, we can start recruiting queer youth into the sport and using it as an empowerment tool for kids to feel good. And some of them may go on playing the NHL, and that's wonderful. Some of them may never leave their local rink, but might get excited to go to the rink. And to me, that matters as much or more. So ultimately, the goal is to empower youth, but it's like taking the long way in a strategic way to get there, instead of just thrusting them into a potentially harmful and dangerous environment. And then we have a pretty cool ambassador program that's focused on outward facing stuff. We're going to, do more education type stuff through them, and put out statistics and put out support through our ambassadors, who are some of the most, revered people in the culture, in the sport. And if they're putting stuff out, maybe that person who is against the community or isn't sure or is confused because they're getting talking points from places that make us seem like we're these, radical villains, will recognize that we're human beings. And then if, some of those folks engage with us, then they go, oh, well, okay, well, maybe this isn't that bad. Maybe I have this wrong because my hockey hero likes them, and this person likes them, and that person likes them. And then all of a sudden we start to see shifts. Then all of a sudden, we create those spaces, and we have less incidents like we've had this year in the NHL, and we have people thriving in the sport.
The original title of this podcast, Line Change, was the idea of opening a door and letting someone else onto the ice, creating space for a new group of people to join the game of hockey and to kind of bring off the old tired guards and ideas that have been holding us in one spot for so long. But that line change, that shift, as you called it, to send a new group of people, new thoughts, new ideas into the sport, and to get those seats at the table. And I really do agree with you in terms of how this actually is going to change from that bottom up, not necessarily from this, let's put rainbows on it, let's call it a Pride Night. I know why they are doing Pride Nights. I know why Pride Nights have become a thing. I know that there is value for the visibility and the celebration portion. But I actually...
We'll agree to disagree.
Yeah, I know. It's... yeah.
In 2000, it would be revolutionary, right, in my mind.
And that's for sure.
It's 2023.
You're right. And unfortunately, hockey is very behind the times.
But all sports.
They are.
And I'm not going to sit here and be an apologist for hockey, but at the same time, like, I've seen more hockey players speak out in the last month than I have any other sport.
Absolutely. And it's been really fabulous seeing, Connor McDavid and Zach Hyman. And I took some heat online and I mentioned something about Matt Tkachuk's statement. And I want to speak about that just a little bit, because I do think it actually ties into what you said, where, he said, everyone's welcome in my locker room. And I was so glad to hear Matt Tkachuk speak out and say that. What my critique is for this idea that the straight community, these gatekeepers in the game, and I'm not calling Tkachuk a gatekeeper, but there are many gatekeepers in the game of hockey, get to choose when LGBTQ plus people get to come into the sport. They get to make these laws that legislate out trans people. And so kind of I got into the term of welcoming is not really what we want. We want that shift from the ground up that you're talking about, so that when queer kids get there, they're not facing homophobia or transphobia or microaggressions of any sort, that the space has changed fundamentally, rather than having a Pride Night where this debate goes on and people are there and end up screaming at each other, whether it's online or in person. The hate is we can feel it right now. Everybody that's talking about this, if you can't feel how much anger there is from certain groups of people, it's shocking. But I think that what you're talking about is so important, that we educate, we empower the community itself, we provide resources and tools, not just for allies, but to get more kids into the game, because this is a game that you love. It's a game I love, and we enjoy playing it, but not everybody enjoys playing it, because once they get there, the environment sucks. It's not welcoming. It's not inclusive. It's not accepting. And they're not even valued as people. And that's, it's a game. It's supposed to be fun.
And I want to make a point that people don't really understand. And I think it's where the fear lies. I think people are afraid that if, there's a space for queer folks or seats at the table for queer folks, it means that there won't be seats at the table for them. a good friend of mine. Years ago, I got asked, right after I came out, I got asked to do a Facebook Live when Facebook Lives were a thing. And from Yahoo Sports. And it was about an incident in the Saskatchewan Junior League where this Grandma Kay, who had been involved with the team since its inception, her husband, I think, founded the team, was billeting players and still involved. She had a plaque with her name on it in her seats at the rink in Melville. And her granddaughter was living with her, and her granddaughter is a trans woman. And a player on the team that was living there left. Didn't want to live there because he found out that the granddaughter was trans. And I had recently come out. I had trans friends, but I wasn't well versed on, or even as well versed as I am today. And I had a really good chat, and they're like, "You need to do it." And I'm like, "I don't know if I'm the right person." They're like, "You're doing it. You're now the face, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Okay." So I had some conversations with a really good friend of mine who's an activist, and also she's the first trans woman to play trans on a soap opera. She's in LA. She's lovely, Cassandra James. Cass and I talked, and one of the first things she said to me was, she used an analogy of a restaurant. And I'm going to use that analogy towards hockey. Currently, if you look into the restaurant, there's certain people that are allowed to go in and sit down and eat. And we're on the outside looking in. And it's not that we want to take away their table or their ability to eat. It's that we want to be able to eat too. So all of our food may take an extra 5 minutes to cook. And the restaurant might be a little busier. But we all just deserve the ability to eat. And in hockey, I keep using the analogy of crumbs. I find a lot of the stuff that happens for the community is crumbs because queer people aren't safe in the locker room, period. And until we have that, I see the rest as crumbs. I understand the sentiment behind it, and I can appreciate it, and it's very corporate. But until we get to the point that the queer person can exist in a men's hockey locker room, that a trans person, trans woman can exist comfortably in a woman's hockey locker room, the rest is crumbs. And yes, there's been progress, and that's lovely, but I want the full meal. And I think once we get a meal, I don't think we're going to be talking about jerseys as much, because we're going to have inclusion, and we're going to see what that feels like, and it's going to feel really good.
It is, and I hope that I'm sitting at that table and sharing that meal with everybody, because I think it's going to be a really special day in hockey when hockey is for everyone becomes not a marketing slogan, which it is right now, and that's all it is. And these Pride Nights are the way that the NHL clubs can portray that they're doing something without actually making noticeable change. But I would love that day.
And again, some of them are doing great
Absolutely.
things in the community.
Absolutely.
And internally, on their corporate side, have queer employees who are safe and welcomed and included. But my focus a lot of the time is on the locker room and on ice type culture of that side, not the corporate hockey culture side, the hockey.
Right. And
culture.
It's one thing to change the business operations and to hire diverse people, which a lot of organizations are doing. And I think that's why one of the reasons I was so upset seeing the Reimer situation was I know that the San Jose Sharks are doing a lot within their organization, and teams like the Seattle Kraken. There's lots of clubs out there that are doing fabulous work behind the scenes, but this whole idea, and for me, it's interesting because I was asked this at a journalist panel about journalist safety a few weeks ago in Toronto, actually the same night as the Alphabet Sports Collective launch, and they said, "Do men still take abuse?" And I said, "Absolutely." But I said, one of the very first things that happens is they attempt to either demasculate or to make a homophobic slur towards you.
And they go hand in hand.
Right. And exactly. It's to try to other the person that they disagree with at that moment. And
There's like a hierarchy that a man, a straight, cis, masculine presenting man, is up here. And if you're gay or a woman, you're less than. So they put people down by using sexist and homophobic language and behaviors if they think, if they want to put you down
right.
because they're
Anytime you
saying that
don't
that's less than a
conform
man.
to the traditional hockey culture of sacrifice everything for the team, play through injuries, there's no emotions, there's, all of those harmful versions of masculinity that, and so I guess, masculinity can be anything. Of course, we know that. Is there any final thoughts that you have on what can hockey do right now to make this better? What can the average hockey fan, the person that's just out there watching the game on their couch, um, what do you want to say to them? What do you want them to do so that this changes? Because I don't think it's going to change just by continuing this current cycle that we're on. But I do know that you have lots of ideas on this. And I think that one of the most important things for people that aren't part of the LGBTQ plus community, that aren't part of another marginalized or traditionally oppressed group, is to shut our mouths and to listen to the community and to let the community guide. So if you could say something to all of these groups of people, the armchair general manager, the hockey fan that's in the rink, the parent that's taking their kids to the first ever game of hockey in their career, what guidance would you give them if you could only say, that elevator pitch to them?
People are suffering. And I don't think anyone wants others to suffer. I think there may be a few people, and I think even that they do it online or in the media as a monetization tool, more so than they actually want suffering for human beings. When I got on the ice, nothing mattered. All my fears about being gay, all my struggles, my suicide attempts, my drinking, everything went away. The only thing that mattered for those few hours was being on the ice. The locker room wasn't that place, but on ice was. For many, or for some, or most in this culture, the locker room is also that place. There's people out there that can't get through the locker room onto the ice to feel the way I felt on the ice, or the way many people who may be listening feel even in the locker room. That joy, that distraction, that happiness. And I've told the story, and I told it at the launch party of this trans boy who came to me a few years ago who was struggling and self-harming. Then he found bodybuilding and weightlifting, and that became a resource and an outlet to feel good, a tool. That should be hockey. We talk about in this culture how we're stand-up people and we want what's right and good and to treat people good, and yet then the sport makes some people who can't conform or are unwilling feel bad. We need people to stand up so that they can help be the change that is needed. And I think it's pretty easy. I think standing up to the language they hear is the first step. And that doesn't have to come in the form of screaming and yelling at people. I think having conversations and engaging and educating has more impact than screaming and yelling. People will tell me that's tone police. That's fine. I have 2 degrees in communications, and I've learned all about barriers of communication. And guess what, folks? We're seeing it on Twitter daily. And it's no different in person. If you scream in somebody's face, I don't think they're gonna. And if we think they're working in good faith and can evolve, then I think there's better ways to do it. A junior player came to me, a major junior player, and told me a story of one of his teammates just looked, some guys were using homophobic slurs, and he said, "Really? We hate gays here? Is that what you're saying? We hate gays? Is that how you feel?" "Well, no. Then why are you saying it?" the language is the key, I think, first step. And it's such a simple fix, but we need people to stand up and engage with folks, engage with your peers, engage with your friends, engage with your kids' friends. Don't be intolerant of it. The sexist, the racist, the homophobic, the ableist language that it is going to come out of their mouths at some point. But do it in a way that is constructive if you think they have the ability to evolve.
That's wonderful advice, and it's what led us to this conversation. It's what led to this podcast being in existence, because I really did want to have the conversations, not just to, as I've been told, approach every topic with a hammer. I wanted to humanize them and have the people that are being impacted by these topics, like yourself, sit here and discuss it with me, and just facilitate and amplify that conversation, because it is important to me. I love this game as much as anyone, which is why I criticize it so much. And I have hope for the game. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. And I know that you have hope for the game too. And we want it to be that space that is there mutually. And that's why I'm hoping that together we can form this line change, as we call it, and create a new time in the game where people who traditionally haven't been part of hockey get to love the sport that we all love right now. So thanks for joining me, Brock, and for giving us your insight.
My pleasure, Ian, and I got to thank you. I've noticed that I'm much more liked now on the internet since you've been there. So
anything to take the heat off of you, anything for you, my friend. So thanks for coming. One of the founders of the Alphabet Sports Collective and an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community in the sport of hockey. Brock is truly one of the most important change makers in the game today, and his insight is so valuable. I hope you learned something, and thank you for joining us. This has been A Line Change.